I still remember the exact moment my boss smiled at me like everything was fine. It was a Thursday morning in late October, the kind where the air in Chicago feels sharp enough to wake up your bones. I had just finished the biggest project of my career, a logistics overhaul that saved the company nearly $500,000. I was proud, exhausted, and honestly expecting at least a handshake, maybe even a promotion. Instead, I got blindsided. His name was Rick Donovan, a man who wore tailored suits and fake humility like armor. He called me into his office, shut the glass door, and leaned back in his chair like he was about to deliver good news. "Great work, Tom," he said. "Corporate loved the presentation." Something felt off. Rick didn't usually compliment anyone unless there was a catch. Then he dropped it. "We're moving forward with restructuring," he continued, tapping a pen against his desk. "And unfortunately, your position is being eliminated." I just stared at him. "My position?" I asked. He cut me off smoothly. "Your contributions have been noted, but the direction of the company is changing." Later that day, I found out the truth. My project, the one I stayed late nights for, the one I skipped my daughter's soccer game for, had been presented to upper management by Rick, with his name on it. He didn't just fire me. He erased me. I packed my desk in silence. A couple co-workers avoided eye contact. One guy, Jason, slipped me a note that said, "This isn't right." But nobody spoke up. That's how it works in corporate America. Everyone sees it. Nobody risks their own neck. When I got home, my wife, Melissa, could tell something was wrong before I even said a word. I handed her the envelope with my termination papers. "They used you," she said quietly. "Yeah," I replied, "and got away with it." At least, that's what I thought. Because what I didn't know yet was that Rick had just set something in motion he couldn't control. And karma? It was already knocking on his door. The next morning felt unreal. I woke up at 6:30 out of habit, stared at the ceiling, and realized I had nowhere to go. No meetings, no deadlines, just silence. Melissa had already left for work, and the house felt bigger than usual, emptier. I poured myself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, replaying everything in my head. Rick's smile, his tone, the way he said, "Your contributions have been noted," like I was some disposable intern. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Jason. "Hey," he said quickly when I picked up. "You need to know something." I leaned back in my chair. "What's going on?" "They're rolling out your system today," he said. "Company-wide." Rick's leading the presentation again. Of course he was. Jason hesitated before continuing. "But here's the thing. There are parts of it only you understand. The back-end integrations, the vendor sync protocols. You never documented everything." I sat up straight, because I was still refining it. "Exactly," Jason said. "And Rick doesn't know that." For the first time since being fired, I felt something shift. Not revenge, something quieter, steadier. "Truth. I didn't sabotage anything," I said slowly. But I also didn't finish explaining it. Jason let out a low whistle. "Then today might get interesting." I hung up and stared out the window. The sky was gray, the kind that promised rain. Chicago weather always had a way of matching your mood, or maybe amplifying it. Around noon, my phone started lighting up. Messages, calls, emails. First from Jason, "It's going bad." Then another, "System errors across 3 regions." Then, "They're scrambling." I didn't respond. I just watched it unfold. By 2 p.m., my former team was dealing with shipment delays, incorrect routing, and a cascade of failures that traced back to the parts Rick never understood. And then, my phone rang again. This time, it was Rick. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment before answering. "Tom," he said, his voice tighter than I'd ever heard it. "We need to talk." I almost laughed. Funny how quickly things change when the ground shifts under your feet. I let the phone ring a couple more times before answering. Not out of spite. Well, maybe a little, but mostly because I wanted him to feel it. That brief stretch of uncertainty. That moment where control slips just enough to make you nervous. "Tom," Rick said again, quicker this time. "We've got a serious situation here." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the faint coffee stain on the table. "Sounds like it," I replied calmly. There was a pause. I could almost hear him choosing his words carefully, which was new. Rick was never careful. He was confident, even arrogant. But now, there was a crack in that polished voice. "The system you developed," he continued, "we're experiencing some inconsistencies." Inconsistencies. I repeated. "That's one way to put it." "Look," He snapped, losing patience for a second. This rollout is critical. We need your help to stabilize it. There it was. Not an apology. Not even acknowledgement. Just need. I rubbed my forehead slowly. Rick, you told me my position was eliminated. Yes, and that decision came from corporate. No. I cut in, my voice sharper now. The presentation came from you, with your name on it. Silence. For the first time since I'd known him, Rick didn't have an immediate answer. That told me everything. Tom, he said finally, softer now. This isn't the time. This is exactly the time, I interrupted. You didn't just take credit. You removed the one person who could actually support what you presented. Another pause, longer this time. In the background, I could hear voices, urgent, overlapping, stressed. Someone was probably standing in his office right now, waiting for him to fix something he couldn't even explain. Karma doesn't always come crashing down like a storm. Sometimes it builds quietly, then hits all at once. What do you want? Rick asked. That question surprised me. Not because of the words, but because of the tone. It wasn't commanding anymore. It was bargaining. I thought about Melissa, about my daughter's disappointed face when I missed her game, about all those late nights while Rick probably slept just fine. I want clarity, I said. Was that my project? Another silence. This one heavier. Yes, he admitted. Did you present it as your own? A breath. Yes. Did you recommend eliminating my position? He hesitated, but not long enough. Yes. There it was. Clean. Undeniable. I closed my eyes for a second, letting that sink in. Not because I needed confirmation. I already knew, but hearing him say it changed something. All right, I said quietly. Now we can talk. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I was the one in control. I didn't answer him right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood the weight of the moment. A week ago, I was the guy staying late, double-checking code, making sure everything worked perfectly for a company that just erased me. Now, the same company was hanging by a thread, and I was the only one holding it. Here's how this is going to work, I said slowly. Rick exhaled, almost like he'd been holding his breath. Okay, I'm not coming back as an employee, I continued. That door is closed. Another pause. Then what are you suggesting? I come in as a consultant. Temporary. You pay me my rate. And what rate is that? He asked cautiously. I named a number that was easily triple my old salary. Silence. I could almost picture his face, tight jaw, calculating eyes, weighing his options. But the truth was, he didn't have any. Fine, he said finally. We'll make it work. No, I corrected him. You'll make it official. Contract. Signed. Before I stepped foot in that building. Rick hesitated again, but this time it was shorter. All right. And one more thing, I added. Of course there is, he muttered under his breath. I want written acknowledgement that the system is my work. That one hit harder. Tom. He started, but stopped himself. He knew better now. If I'm going to fix this, I said calmly, I'm not doing it as a ghost. Another long pause. Okay, he said quietly. You'll have it. We hung up, and I sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle. My heart was beating faster than I expected, not from anger, but from something else. Relief? Maybe. Or justice finally catching up. By 4 p.m., I had the contract in my inbox. Clean. Professional. Desperate between the lines. Melissa got home just as I was reading through it. Let me guess, she said, setting her bag down. They need you. I looked up at her and smiled for the first time in 2 days. Oh, they definitely need me. She crossed her arms. And, I'm going back, I said. But not the way I left. The next morning, I walked into that same glass building in downtown Chicago, but everything felt different. The receptionist who barely noticed me before now stood up straighter. People who avoided eye contact yesterday were suddenly nodding, whispering. Word travels fast when things fall apart. Rick was waiting for me near the conference room. No confident posture this time. No smug smile. Just a man who knew he'd lost control of the story. Tom, he said. Rick, I replied. No handshake. No pretending. Just the truth hanging quietly in the air. And behind those doors, chaos was waiting. The moment I stepped into the conference room, I felt it. The tension, thick like humidity before a storm. Screens were lit up with dashboards full of red alerts, error logs scrolling faster than anyone could read, and a half-dozen managers talking over each other like noise could somehow fix the problem. And then I walked in. It was subtle at first. Conversation slowed. Heads turned. A few people straightened in their chairs. Someone even muttered, "He's here." Funny how respect shows up the moment you're the solution. I didn't say anything right away. I just walked up to the main screen, grabbed a marker, and started scanning the data. Shipment failures in the Midwest. Sync delays on the West Coast. Vendor mismatches in the South. Exactly where I expected the system to crack. Everyone stopped talking, I said calmly, without raising my voice. And somehow they did. That's when I noticed something else. Rick wasn't speaking. He stood off to the side, watching me. Not like a boss, but like someone watching a fireman walk into a burning building. "Jason," I called out. "Pull up the integration logs from Region 3. He moved instantly. No hesitation. That used to be normal, but now it felt different. "Here," he said, bringing it up. I pointed at a cluster of errors. "There. That's the trigger. The system's rejecting vendor IDs because the fallback protocol isn't activating." Rick stepped forward. "Can you fix it?" I didn't even look at him. "I can stabilize it. Fixing it properly will take time." "How much time?" one of the executives asked. "Depends," I replied. "How long did you plan to pretend you understood this system?" That landed harder than I expected. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Rick didn't say a word. "Good." I turned back to the screen. "We implement a temporary override here, reroute validation through the backup channel, and manually sync the affected regions. That'll stop the bleeding." "And long term?" Jason asked. I paused for a second. "Long term," I said, "you build a team that actually knows what they're doing, and you don't fire them." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't awkward. It was honest. For the next 4 hours, I worked like I used to, focused, precise, completely locked in. One by one, the errors started disappearing. Red alerts turned yellow. Yellow turned green. By the time we stabilized the system, it was almost 8 p.m. People started packing up slowly, like they'd just survived something they didn't fully understand. Jason came up to me. "Man, that was something." I nodded. "It shouldn't have had to be." Then I felt it, a presence behind me. "Rick, can we talk?" he asked quietly. I turned to face him. This time, there was no mask left. No polished executive. Just a man who had made a decision and was now standing in its consequences. "Yeah," I said. "We can talk." Because the system wasn't the only thing that needed fixing. We ended up in his office again. Same glass walls. Same skyline view of downtown Chicago. But everything else felt different. The power dynamic had flipped so completely, it was almost surreal. Rick didn't sit behind his desk this time. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, staring out like he was trying to find answers somewhere between the buildings. "I messed up," he said. No corporate tone. No polished phrasing. Just plain truth. I stayed standing too. "Yeah," I replied. "You did." He nodded slowly, like he'd already said that to himself 100 times before I walked in. "I thought I could handle it," he continued. "The presentation, the rollout, all of it. I figured if I just pushed it through, the details would sort themselves out." I let out a quiet breath. "That's not how systems work, Rick. And it's definitely not how people work." He turned to face me then, and for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen in him before. Regret. "I didn't expect it to blow up like this," he admitted. I crossed my arms. "You didn't expect consequences." That hit him. "No," he said quietly. "I didn't." There was a long silence after that. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. The kind that forces you to sit with what you've done. "I'm probably done here," he added after a moment. That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Corporate's flying in tomorrow," he said. "Emergency review. When systems fail at this level, someone takes the fall." I studied him for a second. A week ago, I would have said he deserved it. Maybe part of me still did. But standing there, looking at him, not as a boss, not as the guy who betrayed me, but just as a man who made a bad call, I felt something more complicated. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He gave a small, tired shrug. "Because you should hear it from me, not through rumors." That was new too. Accountability. "I meant what I said earlier," he continued. "The work is yours. I've already sent the documentation to corporate. They know." I nodded slowly. "Good." "And the consultant contract," he added, "that stays. If they ask, I'll make it clear. You're the reason we didn't completely collapse today." I looked at him carefully. This wasn't the same Rick. Or maybe, this was the real one, just without the layers. "People mess up," I said finally. "But what matters is what they do after." He let out a breath, almost like relief. Yeah, he said. Guess I'm learning that the hard way. I turned toward the door, then stopped. One more thing, I said without looking back. Next time you see someone doing the work, don't try to own it. He didn't answer right away, but as I opened the door, I heard him say quietly, there won't be a next time like that. And for some reason, I believed him. The next day, I didn't rush into the office. For the first time in years, I made breakfast slowly. Eggs, toast, real coffee, not the rushed kind in a travel mug. Melissa sat across from me, watching like she was trying to figure out who I'd become overnight. You look different, she said. I smiled a little. I feel different. And it was true. Something had shifted, not just in my career, but in how I saw myself. For so long, I tied my worth to that job, that title, that approval. And in one brutal move, it had all been taken away. But somehow, I was still standing. Stronger, even. By the time I got to the office, the atmosphere had changed again. Quieter, tighter. People spoke in low voices, like they were in a hospital waiting room. Corporate had arrived. You could spot them instantly. Sharp suits, neutral expressions, eyes that missed nothing. They weren't there to fix things. They were there to understand who broke them. Jason met me near the entrance. It's happening, he whispered. I nodded. Yeah, I figured. Around noon, I was called into the main conference room. Same room as yesterday, but this time, it felt colder. Rick was already there. So were three executives I'd never met before. Tom, one of them said, gesturing for me to sit. We've heard a lot about you. I took a seat, calm, steady. I imagine you have. What followed wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No accusations thrown across the table. Just questions. Precise. Direct. Uncomfortable. Who built the system? Who understood its architecture? Who made the decision to proceed without full documentation? Every answer led back to the same truth. And Rick didn't interrupt once. He didn't deflect. Didn't shift blame. He owned it. Completely. By the end of the meeting, one thing was clear. There would be changes. Big ones. That afternoon, it was announced that Rick was stepping down. Not immediately escorted out, not humiliated, but removed, clean and final. Accountability in its simplest form. Before he left, he found me one last time. No office this time. Just the hallway. I meant what I said, he told me. About the work. About everything. I know, I replied. He nodded, then hesitated. Take care of it. I understood what he meant. Not just the system. The people. The standard. I will, I said. And just like that, he walked away. No dramatic exit. No last speech. Just a man leaving behind the consequences of his choices. A week later, I was officially offered a permanent role again. Better title. Better pay. Full credit. This time, I didn't answer right away. Because now I knew something I didn't before. A job is just a job. But respect? That's earned. And once you lose it, no title can buy it back. In the end, karma didn't shout. It didn't need to. It just waited. And made sure everything landed exactly where it was supposed to.